5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Babba, Kwaw, I want to say welcome. I Never Knew TV. What's going on?
Hey, appreciate you having me, man.
Serious thing. We want to get right into it. First question I have here is, how much has remote learning during the lockdown impacted our children academically, socially, and mentally?
I saw with the a reverse within that question, like or kind of like reframing that question that's a little bit more from where I see it. I think the remote learning gave our people an opportunity to see how dysfunctional the system is, right? So we've always known about it. We talked about it ourselves as parents. Growing up within the school system, we had our own experience. So we knew what the school system was, right? But then as we get older, we begin to kind of like individualize our own experience and say, oh no, that was just me. I didn't try hard enough. Maybe I wasn't focused, because I know I was skipping class. I know I was going to play basketball. I know what I was doing. And so our reflection point, even though how dysfunctional the system was, like we're engineered to make the dysfunction an individual dysfunction, right? And so our reflection of looking at our upbringing is really, it's like, what did I do and how I messed up, right? And so then we're like, okay, our children are in there, right? And so it's like this binary, like this difficult situation that we're in, where we have these competing thoughts. We know the system is bad, but right. But you know, we begin to like naturally put ourselves as the problem, right, within it. And so for me, I think the remote learning did a great job in highlighting the dysfunction of the system, where parents can actually sit down and be like, oh no, they're not teaching you anything, or the way that they're teaching doesn't match who you are, right? And so I think, one, that was a benefit. And then after that, you did see like this big movement of like Black children and Black parents starting to like homeschooling, right? And really the homeschooling for me, from that kind of point, was really them recognizing that, you know, we have to take control over the education of our own children, right, on that movement. Now, if we look at what happened to our children, say remotely, right, within that, they were already being overfed in terms of like devices, right? Smartphones, unsmartphones, tablets, and all this, right? And so now, as you come to school, at least you had to put that away, right? But now your whole life becomes intertwined within this type of device. And so it kind of like made that like a waterfall effect, where like you have this 3 to 4 year period where children's whole lives were remote, from school to at home. And so they became even more wrapped into like the, you know, what Amos Wilson called like the media that's up here hypnotizing our children, right? But a lot of like social deviance that we had in terms of being able to communicate with each other, a lot of confidence things. We saw a lot of children, even good children, even smart children, begin to like diminish because we lost that human to human contact.
And you mentioned cell phones. This is one of the things I want to talk on later, but we'll talk about it now. What age do you feel a child should have a cell phone?
Like to use?
To use.
18 to 21, right?
Please explain why.
Oh yeah, so like I have an older son, right? And so I have 2 older children, 17 and 18. I gave my older son, got his phone around like 14. And it was a decision that we regretted, right? Why did we regret that, right? Because at some point, the devices are going to become their life, right? At some point, like Amos Wilson always talked about, wherever the enemies went, they made sure they dropped off their media system. A TV, we could go into the remote village somewhere in West Africa, in Senegal, and still find a TV, because that's the way that they get to program the ideology into us, right?
Repetition, consistency
over and over again. So at some point, when they get that phone, when we decide to give them that phone, we're recognizing that from this point on, they're going to be hypnotized and brainwashed. And the rest of their life is going to be centered around this cell phone, right? And so for me, when I say 18, 21, right, it's really, do we want to start that earlier? Or do we want to delay that process?
It's going to happen regardless.
It's going to happen regardless, right? And for me, it's like, because even us, like we're grown and we're smart. pull out our phones, like, what? Right? Even us, right? Even us that understands the ramifications and consequences of it, we fall victim to it. So when you take a younger mind who's not as critical at that time, right? And I'm talking about like 13, 14, even if they may think they should be doing something else, that pull is so hard. Now, when we look at babies from 0 to 5, even the American Pediatric Association says children should not have like cell phones or tablets, just with the radiation, right? But it also then, when we grew up, we had to learn how to sit down. We had to know how to be quiet. We had to learn how to go to the children's table. We knew how to self-entertain. We knew how to win and
That's
not
a big
sleep.
one, self-entertainment. I'll get back to that.
right. Self-entertain or go on road trips. If we did take road trips and just sit in that car and just sit back, right, and reflect or not, or sleep or think, right? And so we knew that there were different modalities of life, right, where we didn't have to be constantly entertained or constantly entertained from the outside, right, that we can then create from the inside. And so when we give it to children at a young age, not only is it physically harmful for them, it's mentally and creatively harmful for them because they're not able to then learn how to create this imagination within their brain. And the imagination becomes the catapult to building, engineering, and doing all of those things. So now they become addicted to somebody else thinking for them.
Creating for them.
And creating for them.
You brought up a great point. There's a book by a guy called Neil Postman. I think it's called like Entertaining Yourself to Death. And that's one of the things I observed the most in regards to their inability to entertain themselves and their inability to create their world. Because when you're always engaged in someone else's creation, when do you have that repetition, as we did as a kid, to just create whatever's going on in your mind, I wanted to jump back to what you said with the cell phone. Adults don't acknowledge how they themselves don't have any control over the cell phone. I just think that technology is too much for us and we don't want to admit it.
You figure, like, you look at Facebook, Instagram, and if we actually would try to document it, like ourselves as adults, like those who are thinking about it, try to document their children, they'll be surprised that they probably spend more time on their phone than their children, right? And then the things that we're looking at, right? And so when you start talking about this repetition, it's like we were conditioned to see the world from a particular perspective, right? And the phones are engineered and coded to put that perspective in front of us all the time. So it's a way to keep us distracted away from, as you know, away from what we need to really be thinking about, And a lot of the issues that we have, and not knowing how to solve our issues, then this becomes our escape. Whether it's a drug, whether it's alcohol, whether it's smoking, whether it's weed, whether it's mushrooms, right? It's the phone for most of us, right? It's our distraction and our way to cope with our own reality.
And from what I understand at your school, phones are handed in to start the day.
Yes.
All right. How has the response been from parents? Because this is what most parents should be doing, but it seemed like they're scared of the pushback from the kid. So what's the conversation with the parent when you're taking the phone?
So for us, thankfully, we have buy-in from the parents. Right. We have buy-in, right? Because it's understood that we have to create a different world for our children. And whether the parents are actively doing that themselves, at least all of us are aware that this is what needs to be done. And because of that, they allow that process to unfold, Now, the hard part is when we take it and don't give it back. Like if a child brings it in and they keep it and we're like, you didn't check it in? So, oh, you're not getting your phone back, right? And so there's some conversation with parents are like, we bought that phone. I was like, I know, but they broke policy and you allowed them to break policy, so we're going to hold on to it until the semester, And if you have an issue, then there's different options that you may want to explore. But here we have to teach them there are extreme consequences from our own people, our own dysfunctions first, right? And then from the enemy system second, right? And if we don't realize that, if our children don't learn consequences, which has totally changed our own raising, a lot of us are reflecting upon how we grew up, and extension cord, telephone cord, race car track. My mother used to carry a a metal mallet in her purse, right? And so a lot of us, a lot, like when, I remember Kmart, we got it, right? Right. And so there's a proverb in Kenya: "What the ear forgets, the skin remembers," right? And so with my children, I would say the proverb, right? I'd be like, "What the ear forgets, the skin remembers." You need a skin reminder? No, I don't need a skin reminder, right? And with our wife, it was like reflecting upon how we grew up. We look at our experience, or like who we are, Africans in the diaspora, right? We look at us being like shaped within like three streams, right? There was a part that we brought with us from Africa, right? That they tried to beat out of us, right? Uneducate out of us, miseducate out of us. But there's parts of us that left, and that's what we call those Africanisms, right? And then there's a part that's a response to oppression, right? And then there's a part that is imitating the people that stole us, broader white culture, right? So when we look at ourselves, we try to look at these three streams of like what's shaping us, right? And so from our own, so when we raise our children, it was like, which one are we going to draw from? Are we going to draw from our own history and culture? Are we going to draw from our response to oppression? Or are we going to draw from these people who took us, the way that they raised children, right? And so we were very clear that we wanted to pull from our own wealth of history, right? And we were very clear also that much of our upbringing and much of what we call black is not black. It's a response to oppression, right? So like when we would come home and we get in trouble, and they be like, "Go take a bath, and I'm gonna beat you naked, and I'm gonna beat the black off of you." And I was like, "Oh, I'm so glad I'm light skinned today." I don't want to get beat as much as my brother, right? Because in my family, we're from light to dark, like from bright light to dark within my own brothers and sisters, right? But the concept of go get wet, and I'm gonna beat you. I'm gonna beat the black off of you. I'm gonna beat you till you bleed, right? And many of us can like understand that. I mean, many of us had that similar experience growing up, right? And so that's not what black is. That's a response to oppression, right? And so what happened now is that many of us are now trying to like get away from that experience and pick up new models. But the new models that we're picking up are not beneficial.
One extreme to the next.
One extreme to the next. And a lot of times we're trying to raise our children based upon what we thought that we needed, as opposed to raising our children based upon what they need, you know.
And I'm glad you brought that up, right? But one of the things that people feel the child needs is materialism. And that's where they're really dropping the ball at. And I think that's one of the big problems with parenting right now, is that void that they thought they were missing really comes down to consumerism, materialism.
That's right.
And I'm pretty sure you observed that as an educator.
Yeah, so for us, it's like we see a lot of our work is framing ideas, right? So like this one program that we run through the BaoBab Tree is called Wilson Baker Academy. And Wilson is named after Amos Wilson, and the Baker is named after Ella Baker, right? And so Ella Baker framework is strong people don't need strong leaders, and if you give light, people will find their way, right? And so our job then is to create frameworks for them to understand reality, because this is the shortest time of their life, their childhood, from 0 to 18, as much as we have them, right? And then after that, they're on their own. So we have to equip them with frameworks, right? And so the concept around materialism, and then how, if we live in a society that's based upon money, and God we trust, right? And God we trust is on the back of the dollar. So the God of this world, of this society, is money, right? And so what then if we're the creators or runners of that society, what then does this society need? People to constantly consume. So then what does it have to do? It has to engineer inadequacies, right? It has to engineer insecurities, have to engineer a sense of lack of self-worth, right? And so these become themes that we talk about. And so because of that, like, we don't allow children to wear any European name brands. Like, they come in like, "I got the new Jordans." But are those the new Chicantes Jopes? What about that? What about the new Jopes that you got, right? What about, "I got the new Queen and Zingas," right? Because every deficiency that we have ends up bringing money back to the people that create those deficiencies, right? And so we then have to fill those deficiencies with like a sense of positive self-worth, and then get them and us also to realize that whatever we consume should bring it back to our own communities.
Why are so many black children given IEPs?
Man, it's like a money game, right? Like that question could be answered in like so many angles, right? I'll start with an institutional angle, right? As a charter school, right? Let's say as a school, right? Public school within any city, right? They get X amount of dollars per child. Typically about $15,000 to $20,000, right? You go to school in DC, you get about like $15,000 to $20,000 per child for that child to come to your school, right? If that child has an IEP, it almost goes to $50,000, right? So then if you look at that on an organizational level, how then do I bring in resources, right? I'm gonna give everybody IEPs, right? You get IEP, you get IEP, right? So on a because America is business, right? It's not people, right? It's not like what's best for me and you, what's best for our children. It's how do we make money, right? And so those institutions, hospitals, whatever they are, right? They're all about maximizing profits, right? And so if I'm a principal of a school, public or charter, it's in my benefit, financial benefit, to get more and more children on IEPs, institutional level, right? If we bring it down on the front level to like the front line, 84% of teachers are white women, right? Who grew up in a segregated America, who don't understand black people at all, outside of what we listen to on radio and what we see on TV, right? And so when they come in and see this child jumping and flipping and having fun and can't sit in a chair, that child has a problem. And it's easier for them to interact with them as saying that there's some deficiency within them, as opposed to acknowledging that they're unequipped to teach black children. And so therefore they will then create this, Tyrone don't listen, he don't follow directions, he can't say his pledge to allegiance all the time. There's some type of deficiency within them. Because there really is no test to say that you have these type of deficiencies.
This man, listen, I thought it was so cool because I taught in Philly for years, right?
Uh-huh.
And I remember they asked me to recommend a child for IEP. I said, fine, I can't do that. I'm not equipped to do that. What you asking me for? I'm a history teacher. So no, I'm showing you how wild it is. The fact that they're asking a random person like myself. I'm not a psychologist.
Right.
What you asking me that for? Yeah,
Yeah. So like it's just easier for them to label them, put them on this special track, and then it becomes an excuse of why they're failing, because there's no accountability, right? It's not that the institution is the issue up top. It's not that the teacher is the issue on the front line. It's he is the issue, or she is the issue. And what I see like devastating our communities, right, is that as these children grow up,
internalize that idea about themselves.
There you go. Internalize the idea about themselves. And also don't give them a system of accountability, right? Because they end up feeling the way, and then we end up thinking about them away.
Pass them right through.
And pass them right through until they're 18 and now not equipped to do anything in life but what America designed them to be.
What advice would you give parents? And I want to be clear when I say this, because every child with an IEP doesn't have a learning disability.
Right.
What advice would you give to parents whose child actually has a learning disability to support them as much as they can?
First advice that I would give is just, and this is just in general, believe in our children, right? If we put 10 boys on a basketball team at 5 years old or 4 years old, we all think they're going to the NBA, right? Like I coach youth sports, right? When it's time to sign up for the county basketball program, if it opens at 8 in the morning, you have parents at midnight camping out.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. Like camping out. Because like there's certain places where there's like a limited amount of people that can make that or play on that program, right? And so they would camp out from 12 o'clock to 8 so they could get their children registered, right? We have a PTA meeting there, so it's a different story, right? right during the school. But Why? And every parent that makes the team actually believes that their children are going to the NBA. Delusional, but actually believes it, right? We put them into a dance program. Every parent believes that their child is going to be the best dancer in the program and could go to Hollywood, right? Every parent, right? Whether they're short, they're fat, they're tall, they're skinny, can dribble, cannot dribble, can dance, cannot dance, can sing, cannot sing. Every parent honestly believes their child is a star. I'm saying take that same belief in their mental capabilities and in their academic capabilities. Be delusional. Or maybe, and then you may find out that you're not delusional if you invest that amount of energy and effort into believing the abilities of your child. Expect that 5-year-old to be the smartest person in this world. Expect that 4-year-old to be the next Michael Jordan, LeBron James, right? Just like expect that, right? And walk with that as an absolute truth, right? About your children, your child, and all of our children. Because if we actually believe that, then going back to like COVID, then we will realize it's the system that are creating these problems within our children, right? It's not our children. Now, back to your question, there are children who have different learning styles, right? We have children that have come on here that were called autistic. We have children that came in here that was called emotionally this, behaviorally this, right? There's something within black children, within black studies that have shown that we have high verve, right? Verve is a measure of psychological development or psychological stimulus that a person needs in order to get at mentally rest, right? You know, and those who have high verve need a lot of stimulants. Those who have low verve, they don't need a lot of stimulants. They could just get mentally focused and be locked in, right? And so every study shows that black children and people raised like black children, African children, right, have high verve, right? And if we think about it, we could be at home talking to your mother and watching TV on the phone with your girlfriend and doing your homework and know where everything is going on, right? That's high verve. Low verve is, turn that down, you're distracting me, right? So then what happens is that we're in a system that is set up for low verve people, right? The whole educational system is based upon the development and cognitive stages of a white girl, right? And so black boys then don't have a chance. So if you think about, like, just think about our experience. And everybody knows this. I grew up in Detroit, right? You grew up in Jersey, right? Some people in California, Texas. Everybody knows this. We're leaning back in our chair in school. We start rocking. We sit up. We start banging on the desk. Somebody over there be like, oh, right? What are we doing? And after we can't do that anymore, man, I got to go to the bathroom. And you actually get up to go walk the halls. You can't, right. Because what we're trying to do is just create stimulants, right? We're trying to create stimulants to get us focused, right? But if we don't understand that child has an IEP, that child has this, that has this, right? Second thing is understand that our children learn differently, and it's okay, right? And not all children are going to learn the same. And we know that if we have multiple children, right? Like we know that if we have, like, I have a daughter that learns this way, I have a son that learns this way, and I have another son that learns a whole different way, right? So now you multiply that by 35 children in the school system, right, with one teacher who cannot give adequate support, and then you will see all the variations just acting out. And like I said, it's just easier to label them something, right? Back to the question. Be delusional about their abilities and realize that it's not delusion at all. They are absolute geniuses, right? Second point, understand that they learn a certain way and find the way that they learn. And like for us, the children that were labeled by the system, right? When we first started, we thought, oh, that system, they just label all our children. There's nothing wrong with them. After about 4 years, like, no, there's a difference of learning here, right? And once we found out that say if there was 50 children, let's say that 35 or 40 of them, nothing was wrong with them. That was just easy to label them that way, right? And then let's say the 10 to 15 of the other children, they actually had a difference of learning, right? And what we would say, look, every county, every school district, they have a program where you could go down there and get them cognitively tested, right? And we're saying, we're not testing them because we think there's something wrong with them. That's what they do. We want to know how they learn. Because once we see their way of learning, then we can create a method to teach them based upon the way that they learn.
Should our energy be put towards fighting to change America's public school system or creating our own systems to educate our children?
Both. Right, both. Why do I say both? If revolution comes tomorrow, we got to eat today, right? How do we eat today in order to get to where we need to be tomorrow, right? And so if we look at the landscape, like I said, there's a big movement right now of like Black families, African families in America, pulling their children out of school to homeschool, right? But not most families are equipped to be able to do that, both financially or say background-wise, content-wise, right? And so we have majority of our children still in the public school systems, right? And then we have a group of people who are going the independent route, right? We have to build the model, and we have to build the systems that's going to create the next stage of thinkers for our people, right? And we have to build our people where they are, you know? But it's difficult to do both, right? And so I think once an individual identifies what route they're going to take, be very clear about the condition that we're finding ourselves in and how we're going to move it from dependent institutions to building independent institutions, you know. So I chose the independent route. But if we think about it, I probably wouldn't be this way if I didn't meet somebody in my progress, right? Like during my development, my fifth grade teacher, who always would have Malcolm X on the board, right? Had Marcus Garvey on the board, and I had no concept of who they were at all, right? Who talked about like Black stuff, right? Like growing up in Detroit, and that just wasn't our reality, right? But if I didn't get that seed planted at that point, you know, if I look back now and be like, would I have been able to grow and develop the way that I am now, right? So we always need people out there planting those seeds and not being delusional that we're going to change the system, right? The system is not broken, right? It's not a failing system.
I always say
it's a successful system, right?
I always say the system works perfectly.
That's right.
As designed, is very efficient.
Right. It's not failing our children. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do to our children. And then once we recognize that, is then how then do we go and counter that in the places that they're in until we can get them all to a place that we can properly educate our own.
Many Black parents are interested in homeschooling, right, but don't know how to manage the responsibility of earning an income and providing an education for their children. Are homeschool collectives the solution for Black parents in that position who are interested in giving their child a homeschooling experience?
I mean, I think that's like a lot to like digest within that, right? Because like from the work that we do, we come across a lot of people that want to homeschool or want to create like collectives, independent spaces, right? Because to be African is to be collective, right? Once we start taking our children out and doing it by themselves, it's no longer African, right? It's no longer Black education, right? Right, and that's something that we realized very early because we raised our children, the two older ones together, extremely smart, had Harambes everywhere in Africa, they knew everything, but they were like social misfits, right? They would go around people and be, like, oh man, what are we doing to our children, right? In terms of their social development, right? In terms of their humanness, in terms of their peopleness, right? And so because of that, any individual should want to move to a collective because that's the healthier way to raise children, right? So that they always will know that there's somebody above them, the older one, that's going to help build them up, and there's somebody below them that they have to help them and build them up. And it's never about you. That you always have to learn how to coexist and be part of a community, right? And no matter what subject we teach them, they will never get that without experiences, like on a day-to-day. Like you have to give that person your food. That's what Ujima means. That's what cooperative means. That's what family means. But I didn't eat all day. I'm with you. They didn't either. You have to, right? Like if you grow up in a big family, you learn that, right? You learn that you have to live as one, right? So any individual family that is attempting to do it themselves and trying to juggle all of the components should always seek to be part of a community for the healthiness, like the humanness of the children. So just not the content, but like the inside of who they are as a person, right? If we thought of just paying a black tax to ourselves, right, as opposed to iPhone, right, Jordans or LeBrons, right? If we just thought about making a black tax in our own community, like a community on blocks can fund their own education system, right? So like, I'm a parent, you're a parent, he's a parent, she's a parent, we're all parents, we're all thinking about this. Can we all put about like $500 in a pot for a month, right? And if whether you have children or not, right? We can then create a collective system where we can raise 25 or educate 20 to 25, 30 children in our own neighborhood, right? And so a lot of the poverty is not about just our economic state. It's like the poverty of our ideas and their creativity, you know? And that's one of the things, whether it's because our creativity has already been, you know, cut, right? And then the cell phones does it even more, right? Because one of the most important things that were taken away from us was our ability to build and lead our own selves. Like, we don't have to think about water. We don't have to think about gas. We don't have to think about energy. We don't have to think about roads. We don't have to think about hospitals. We don't have to think about education. Because once we became somebody else's, right, we lost the power to think about what does it mean to be free, you know? And so if we actually thought about it as like adults, like, we actually could. We actually could run our own education system. We actually could build our own hospitals. And we actually could take these collectives of 20 or 30 people and then be able to say, we're gonna put X amount of money within it, and that creates X amount of money every month. And even if I'm not equipped and you are equipped, we can then pay for you to actually leave your job, and we could bring in other people to actually raise our children that way. You know?
Can you please tell us about the inception of Wilson Baker Academy Homeschool Collective for Excellence and Achievement?
The inception is, you know, when we were first brought across these shores, right? And those of our ancestors that took a piece of Africa with them. Before they left, those that jumped off the ship and went back into the ocean, and those that walked back into the ocean to go back, right? Because there was always a sense that we need to be somewhere else and do something else, right? There's a book called Self-Taught that talked about during the enslavement, right? North Carolina, Georgia, that there would be people that would dig holes in the ground, right? Like, create whole classrooms and rooms underground and teach each other how to read, right? And at the consequence of being found out, of getting your eyes chopped out or your nose, right? And so, but there's like this spirit of building and knowing and knowledge and doing something with that to create a better way for ourselves, right? And so for us, we see us just doing our part within that lineage, right? Of course, when we had children, it was like, okay, where they're going to go and how we're going to do it. And like DC or Metro DC area is blessed to have multiple independent African-centered institutions. But they were, like, say, just kind of far for many of the families that were going there. And so then we came together with a group of parents, like-minded parents, that we talked about, try to pool our resources. All of us were working in 7 different places and took off an hour here and took off an hour there to make sure that we can give the children what they needed. And then was able to think about how can we make it more efficient for the growth for our children.
And structuring the curriculum, what does that look like?
Oh, we built the curriculum, right? So we built the curriculum. So I have a math and history background. My wife has a literacy background. We have that lady that we hear speaking right now. She has a science background, right? And for us, education is content, context, and compass, right? Content being, so African-centered education. Content being what we learn, right? In 1492, Columbus stole me, you, and your mama too, right? So we're changing the content, right? But a lot of times we think that that's just it, right? We tell the truth of facts, right? But then after content is what we talked about, the learning styles of our children. It's the context. It's how we teach our children, right? What type of learners are we, right? Like we learn through repetition, we learn through music, we learn through dance. So then we have to then get the context of how the information is taught. And then the compass, right? The compass is like giving them the direction. Like now you have all of this information. What are you going to do? What should you be doing? What do we want you to do? What do your ancestors and and what you were sent here? Like, what is that purpose of being here, right? Because we're not trying to let you participate and be the first person to work at Apple or at Google and participate in a system that is no good for anybody, that's polluting the world, that creates mass murderers, that creates wars over, right? We don't want participation. We actually want to create a different type of world, and we need people that think about that, so we give like direction within that, the compass part.
What advice would you give to brothers who are suffering from the disease of self-hate?
I think that was all of us, right? Like, I grew up in Detroit, and I always tell people I grew up in the black country. I grew up in the other country of Africa or Jamaica called Detroit, right? Most concentrated black city in the country when I grew up, right? Before the Pilgrims came, Pilgrims are back in all major cities, right? And they pushing us out. But I remember, right? Like we'd be in high school, you see the girls, like how we were trained, right? And we look at hips to legs, back up, right? We're trained that way, right? It goes here to here, right? And like when I began to like learn a little more, right, about myself, right, about us and think a little bit more, I'm like, man, we really didn't look at the dark skinned girl, like we didn't, right? Unless they were like had the big hips, right. But like how they would just walk right past us, right? And it wasn't like a big discrimination where you were like, oh, you this and you that, right? But it was like, it's just internal. It's the Beyonce effect. Right? It was Halle Berry for my time, right? Halle Berry or Vanessa Williams, right. And so we conditioned to see things in that reality, right? And then it's like reflecting back, like how did I not only think that in Detroit, but you in New Jersey, right? And you in Texas, and you in California, and you in this, right? And I went through a lot of deaths young, when I was young, that made me reflect, and a lot of times, a lot of our people are just caught up trying to survive or distract, that we really don't have time to think, about what's real and what's not real. And so most of us are still dealing with, I don't even think that we would even coin it self-hate, right? Like, I hate myself because I love myself. Brush my teeth, wash my face, I even try to smell good from time to time, right? I love myself, right? It's keep asking questions, right, about the reality that we see, right? Keep asking questions. I mean, that's what I would say, right? Because it's like if we suffer from like say self-hate or lack of self-awareness or lack of awareness, right? Because I think it's really the awareness of our life and our reality that then creates all the other stuff, the self-hate, the destruction, the this, the that, and the other, right? The lack of proper education, right? So when we talk about like, we'll go somewhere and they'll see other children, they're like, what's happening with them? They just never had an opportunity to learn. And so now they're revealing the type of misinformation that they have, right? And so, and if Harriet Tubman said, well, I freed hundreds of slaves, but could have freed thousands of more if they only knew. So we're on plantations, picking cotton, getting lynched, getting hung.
Still don't want to leave.
Still don't want to leave and still don't know that they're enslaved. So now we fast forward here, how if we had that many of people that did not know at that time, multiply that by 100%, right? Of how many people don't know right now, right? And so I would just say, like, keep questioning reality, keep questioning the life that we see, until the awareness clicks,
For those unaware, during your graduation at Morehouse, you were presented with a Rhodes Scholar Award, and you didn't accept the Rhodes Scholar Award, right? How old were you at the time?
I was 22.
22, right? So
Uh-huh.
one first question I have is like, Fire, what type of what type of vibe you was on to have that understanding to see the true representation? Because it's a big thing. You at school, so
Hmm.
I figure this is a big accolade. And people love accolades from white people,
Hmm.
so this
Hmm.
should be like the heights of a student. When did you, or how did you get that understanding of what a Rhodes Scholar really is and what who Cecil Rhodes was?
Man, I was like I said, I went through a couple of deaths younger when I was in Detroit, right? Um, and that made me question life. Like remember I said, just keep questioning, right? That made me question life, right? Um, and all the stuff that we were trained to do, right? Because and we know it's a setup because the stuff that I was doing 40 some years ago, it's the same problems that we have now, right? Right? Smoking, drinking, this, that, and the other, money, clothes, cars, and you know the songs, right? They're the same songs, they're the same problems, it's the same recipe, right? Um, and I wanted to change. Like I really wanted to do something different, right? I grew up in a family, well, um, my mother left my father when I was like 4, but my father and the people were still around. And they were like black power people. Like they were like, the system is crooked. We hate whitey, right? But then I would also come home and see them shoot one brother shoot another brother in the head, right? And pee on each other. I'm like, and we live in Detroit. There's no white people. So if the white people are the devil, then what are you? What are we? Right? And so I was ready. So it was like, I always want to situate, our life is not our life, right? Just like our body is not our body. Like our parents made us, right? We're like, oh, you got your grandmama eyes. Oh, you got your mother this, right? So like we didn't make ourselves and we're a continuation of family. So whatever we do as individuals is really a continuation of all of those family members and the hands that put on us, right? And so when I try to speak, I always try to give the reality of that. None of us have the recipe. And if anybody talks if they have the recipe, we should get them. Because if they really have the recipe, then why we have these problems, right? And other than that, all of us just have some ingredients from our cooking of trying to cook something better for ourselves and our families, right? Um, and so I knew I was ready to change, but I was still in the city. And so when I went to Morehouse, I was ready. I had a family background that talked about black power and the system being wrong and all the deficiencies that came with oppression, right? Um, and then I had a teacher that began just to explain what happened. And it just made crystal clear sense, right? Like I saw the setup. I knew the school systems, right? I knew what I saw in my hood. I was very clear that this is a setup, right? And so I was given like an opportunity and a space to actually reflect and change. And then from that day, I was like, look, I'm gonna be about the business of building for our community. It's like around 18, right? Um, Now fast forward for the road. I didn't apply for the roads, right? The I didn't accept any any white accolade. They call it like a Golden Key Society, the Phi Beta Kappa or Phi Beta Sigma. If you're like a 3.8 and above, right? I didn't join any Greek fraternity, right? Because I was like, right, we have our own history, we have our own culture, we have our own models, and if we're going to build something, and maybe our ancestors back even in America, our people here before maybe didn't have the connections to history and culture that we do now. Maybe that's why they went that route, but we need a new route to continue, like to develop. So I didn't accept anything that was openly, clearly white, right? Um, and I knew around 18, I was like, look, the way that America is set up is that education, a PhD, is like God, right? You can get a PhD in shitology, right? Um, and so if you get a PhD, then people respect you, right? But they respect you for the system. So you have to be very clear that you have to use this. This is going to be my platform, as opposed to a minister or a basketball player or this. My platform is going to be able to use what was created here and then flip it, right? And so whenever we talked about getting high in the academic level, we have to talk about that the academic level is criminal and is set up for us to fail, right? And so when I got there, what happened was it was the first black Rhodes Scholar from Morehouse that was given the convocation or giving the head address, right? I learned about who Cecil Rhodes was in my first year, right? And that's kind of like the idea that many people think that I denied the Rhodes Scholarship. I never even applied for the Rhodes Scholarship, right? And because many people in the university was like, you need to apply. You have a such and such. We're bringing the first one that ever came from a HBCU and Morehouse coming to speak for graduation. I was like, okay. We're going to use a different route, and we're going to talk about it in a different way right now, you know. And so we went through a process where I had to write a fake speech and all this other stuff, and
Did you tell like brothers and sisters about it, or you kept it to yourself?
I kept it to myself. Well, there's a few, because I had like a friend of mine, a brother of mine, that was like, look, I need you to write a speech that Morehouse would like, right? Because you have to meet with the president. You have to meet with them before you give the speech. So they wrote a speech. We went through it. We was going to go, oh, yes, yes. And thanks all the donors who made this white education possible. Right, right. And so when it was time to go, I just flipped it. And
Right. What was the response after? Did you have to meet with admin? But it graduated, so you was pretty much over.
It was pretty much so like everybody loved it. But I did get a letter from the president. It's talking about how it was a disappointment, how I embarrassed the institution. You're about to go to X and X school. Do you know how that school got their money and resources? You took the cowardly way out.
That's the wording that he used.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, so we speak to a lot of people about sports as an ex-athlete. My take, but as a person who's in there now, right? I view when I did the AU circuit, I viewed it as toxic while I was there. As I got older, I said, "Wow, this thing's pretty wild." And from what I understand, it's gotten much worse. Right?
Oh yes.
Please tell us about the current state of youth sports.
Man, it's the number one. It's the highest earning sports organization or sports business in the world.
Are you serious?
It makes more money than the NFL. It makes more money than the NBA. It makes more money than baseball, the Major League Baseball. It makes more money than hockey. It makes more money. Youth sports is the number one earning sports business in this country and in the world. Like the amount of money, I mean, it's not even close. Like Major League Football and baseball is not even close to how much money youth sports make, right? And so if we go back there and say in America it's about business, and we say, you know, for us, it feeds on our deficiencies, right? It feeds on our deficiencies to get us to buy stuff. Oh, there's something wrong with your head. Oh, you so black. Oh, I'm so black. Let me go. Your hair's so big. Oh, your hair's so nappy. Oh, your eyelashes ain't long enough. Oh, right? Like it feeds on our deficiencies, right? And the youth sports, it feeds on our delusions, right? Or it feeds on our poverty and our struggle, right? And because many of our people are in conditions where we don't see no way out, right? It feeds on our idea and our delusion that this is our way out.
That is a delusion, but continue.
Right, right. It's like say basketball is more likely to get struck twice by lightning than to make it to the NBA, right? You're more likely to become a rocket scientist and like build whatever, like 1,000 times more likely, right? But it feeds upon our people, our sense of trappedness and not having solutions to that, right? And so you then create a system where you get these immediate rewards and
I think you just said the key word. I think the attraction to the sports is a mixture of the immediate reward and culturally what we praise. Right? I'm from East Orange, New York. You said Detroit's the number one with the black population.
Back at that time,
Back at that, I think East Orange, we had it for the longest, 99%. And in that environment, the only way you got attention as a young person was being extremely violent,
right?
Being a womanizer, maybe an entertainer. Really the violence in the women in sports,
right? And the sports allowed you not to be extremely violent.
Thank you, sir.
Right? It allowed you not
take
to
you out that loop.
Right. Because it's like they did. I think it was. I don't know. It was somewhere in Jersey. They did a study. Right. They did a study on black children in white communities, right? And the basis of the study was, why are these black children failing, right? We know why they're failing in Newark, right? We know why they're failing in Trenton. We know why they're failing in Camden. Resources, environment, right? But why are these black children failing here when they have the nice houses, the nice schools, all the resources, right? And so when they looked at it, they looked at the test grades, and the black children were outscoring their white counterparts in elementary school. I'm talking about like 10 to 20 points higher in all standardized tests, right? But by the time they got to middle school, those same black children that were smarter were 20 to 30 points dumber, right, than the white counterparts, right? And then the conclusion drawn from that is, by the time you become 13, 14, and 15, it's all about your social environment and what you're being praised about, right? And because the concept of blackness has been defined by our enemies, right, it's a limited definition of what it means to be black.
I call it white made black culture.
There you go.
And if you don't fall in this mold, your blackness is questioned.
That's right.
And you don't want to be ostracized. So you find, you know how much people I know growing up that really got into like some real criminal activity that didn't need to. That's the next thing. There's this idea that everyone has to hustle. A lot of people don't choose to do so, but that social acceptance is a lot of pressure, because what do you get praised for?
Right. And you said it exactly. It's like, it's that social acceptance, right? Because around 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, right, it's like a rebirth of the brain, like literally, right? Just like when the children are born, their life is based upon imitation of their parents. When that puberty comes in, their life and orientation is based upon the acceptance of their peers, right? And so now parents don't matter. And you think about it, come on, mom, you don't know what you're talking about. And at some point you loved your parents, and at some point they ain't know nothing, right? And then when that happens, like you said, what has been engineered into our society as to be acceptable? And where do we get praise from? If you bald, you the man. If you got a 4.0, who cares? Nobody cares.
Right. No, the coolest thing I saw when I was younger, you remember that movie, Don't Be a Menace by a Joke?
Yeah.
I saw this clearly. There was a young man who went to college, right? I think he got a scholarship too. Nothing. Like, if you didn't know him, you never would know.
Right.
A brother came home from being
in jail.
Like
it's a block party.
You know what I'm saying? So what does that show you? The next man looking like he need to go to jail now.
Right.
That's how people think. You created this idea in this person's head, and your mold. We don't want to accept how we mold behavior in our use by what we give attention to.
Right. And so I think that then goes back to your first question about like, what would be the advice if our children did have some type of mislabel or different learning style? Praise them. Right. Like we have to create a different social narrative.
Gas them up, fire, hype them up.
There you go. Like we as men and women in our own communities, we have to create that counter. Right. We have to create something that's healthy praise for our children, you know, because I think that point that you hit on is so real and so deep and so misunderstood. When we do that, right, it's the people that's below them, that's younger than them, that be like, oh, that's how you get praised. Oh, that's what we do. Let me get locked up. Let me get a block party.
It sounds, but when you really analyze it, because I could be truthful, I knew dudes that hoop just for attention. Like played college and summer preferred. They never loved basketball. But that was their means. Like, don't nobody pay no mind in the house.
Right.
They look a little odd.
Right.
But this is their vehicle to get some type of prestige and praise. Now, put that in different other areas. Who's the dude that's fighting on? Yeah, he may have an anger issue, but it's fueled because you get a certain little praise from being the dude.
That's right.
That you have uncontrollable rage. How does that help you long term?
And then like the brain really can't distinguish between positive and negative attention. It's the attention, like you said.
Female, same thing. Because there's always this father not home. That's not the case all the time, right? It's just who gets attention.
Yeah. So then you multiply that with like the social media, like this, like we're going back, say, to the sports or anything. It's like the praise. It's like they're able to promote this idea of like what you're going to get gratification from so quick, so that everybody is in it. Parents, children, everybody gets caught up, you know.
And I know I cut you off early with the short term, but I wanted to say, in regards to, have you noticed this too? Because when I was younger, right, parents didn't really come to games like that, like especially for AU,
Right.
maybe a high school game.
Right.
I noticed parents are like super involved right
Oh
now,
my
right?
gosh, yes.
Is it a case where they're like trying to live through the child? Are they trying to show support? Like, what's the dynamic do you notice with most parents?
I mean, I think it's both. Like I've been to, when we grew up, like especially like say AAU, you did not have parents that flew to every city that they were playing at.
Maybe one parent on
Well, one parent who had
Yeah,
money.
one parent,
Right. The one parent who had money.
You're by yourself.
Right. Like most of our parents, they were working, they couldn't get off, right? But now it's like, I think that's also a flip in how people are now raising their children, where they're like hovering over them and not allowing them to grow and develop, right? Like imagine the stuff and I'm thinking about it like myself, right? We grew up, we had no cell phones. We could go wherever we want to, come home by the time the street lights are on. If not or not, right? Or get the consequences if you don't come home, right? Right? We would be miles doing whatever we did. And I'm thinking like, yeah, that's right. And I'm like, these parents don't live like that anymore. And I'm like, would I let my child do that? Right? Would I let my child, my 13, 14, 9, because we were, younger, our parents had to work a lot, or they gave us a lot more room, or there wasn't technology, right? And so we just allowed them to be. But would I let my 7-year-old, even with all of my, oh yeah, we're hovering around our parents and it's messing up our children, right? So I think it's like when we call contradictory commitments, right? When brother used to talk about contradictory commitments. We know these ideas, but we have these contradictions within those ideas. So I see with the new parents being everywhere is one, hovering, right? That's just like the age of like we as like our community has turned into that, right? 2, living through your child. Yeah, like the most fights I have seen has been between mothers at 7 and 8-year-old games.
Are you serious?
The most fights I have, I mean, like one mother had a stroller, right, behind the stroller fighting at 7 and 8-year-old games, right? And I actually hear people like, this is the way we gonna get out, you better get it, right? I think that just speaks volumes to like us not having solutions to our issues.
That desperation.
And desperation, And so, and all the momentary like successes and the momentary praise kind of like soothes us for a little bit,
And the wickedest thing I see with athletes is that we don't speak about it a lot, but like that mental health and because so many people are like banking on you to do good. It's so embarrassing. Please don't want to talk about it. It's so embarrassing when it doesn't work out.
Right. Right.
And like so many men are broken because a lot of athletes, their life ends at the last buzzer this year.
I mean, I think that mental health piece is like so real. They say within that because like it's an unforgiving game. Like you could be the man today, and tomorrow you ain't. Right. And then how do people like rebound, right? And it's like, I mean, it's a toxic environment. Right. I mean, like in terms of building like healthy people, right? Like so.
So young.
And so young. So like I have an older son that I was like, no, you didn't grow up the way I grew up. We live isolated, like on like acres, trying to create a safe space. But you need to know, right? So I put them in and basketball is going to give you the way to get some grit and stuff, right? And so I did that with my older ones, like, yeah, now you know how to deal with people calling you a B and H all the time, your coaches, and then the stands, and then all the stuff, right? And then my younger son, like I was like, okay, it's time to get into basketball. And I would take him to a trainer, and he's 6, right? And then the trainer was like, you all slow, boo, 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 boo. And he's crying. I'm like, why are you crying? I don't like to be doing that. I was like, you better. And at that moment, I was like, what? It clicked. Like, why am I doing this, right? It is so toxic to development as a person, right? And we give up so much for what? For you to be able to play basketball at LA Fitness at 22? We do so much to our children. For what?
Oh, fact. That thing is, I noticed that, like, I don't really talk about sports, but I've been talking about it lately. And like, my vision is really to get brothers to open up because they're broken, man. Like,
Right.
it breaks so many people. Even the ones that make it to the league, they broke insane. Right? Don't get it twisted. And we're just setting up so many boys for failure because there are not a lot of spots. I think it's 250,000. It may have increased. 250,000 high school boys seniors, right? There are only 1,100 D1 scholarships. Out of that 1,100 now with NIL, probably cut that down to 300.
Right. Right.
Between JUCO and overseas, you're probably looking at 90. So like, I'm not a mathematician, but
This is
according
bad
to
numbers.
people trying to get 90 positions, probably is not like where it's at. It's
Right.
so like,
And to play for only 2.5, 3 years
and, like,
at that.
the reason I don't even talk to people about sports because like they don't understand how competitive it is
Mm-hmm.
and how good you have to be to get a college scholarship
Mm-hmm.
and how out of the world you have to be to get to the league.
Right.
They can't comprehend it. So it's like, why are we having this conversation? But these parents need to like look into themselves, man, and figure out what they're doing with their children because especially with the boys, when you identify as a basketball player, it's very hard for you to transition to something else. And when it's over, your life is pretty much over. That's what happens to a lot of the brothers. You know?
No, man, I think you're on, like, you hitting it like on the head because like basketball, football, like that mental piece, right? And then just knowing how much of our reality is coded against us, right? And we're going to be questioned in so many other levels that we willingly put our boys in situations where they're going to be constantly ridiculed and put down, you know, and ultimately for what? You know, when if we're going to be investing in them, it has to be in the space that builds them.
I will say this though: they need a little verbal abuse, bro.
Oh,
this generation in moderation.
Oh, I'm with you on
we
that.
We need a little. I just want to be clear. Like, I think they need to be kind of, within reason and a balance. Some coaches take it where to the point where it's destructive. I think there's a fine line where like these kids need to be roughed up.
No, I agree. I agree in terms of like firm and discipline,
but not going all out there where it's pointless at this point.
Right. Oh yeah. Oh no, I'm with you. You know, but I really like that point that you talk about, that the type of wear that it has on people, like when that identification is only this, you know. And so for us, it's like the way that we talk to the children is like they're like, I'm a dancer. It's like, no, you're right. You dance. You're a child of the Creator who does a lot of things great, and just dancing is one of them. Basketball is just one of them. That's not who you are, right? There's something more special and bigger about all of us than the stuff that we do. So he said, what type of person, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? Who do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be great. I want to be a good father. I want to be a good mother. I want to be a good brother. I want to be a good sister, right? I want to help build for my community, right? Now, what I do working, that's what I do working, right? But who we want to be and who we are totally different. And I think just even like if we could help reframe that within like talking to our children that's playing sports and stuff, you know, because it is real. They lose a sense of like themselves after it's over, you know.
Can you let the people know what the BaoBab Tree Foundation is?
Yeah, so the BaoBab Tree Foundation is our way to interface with our community and build. So the BaoBab Tree, like if you ever been to Africa or go to Africa, and there's some BaoBab trees in the Caribbean that came over. It's like these huge trees, a Weema way, Lion King, that huge tree, right? That's the BaoBab tree. Well, Bafiki was in there, right? And so they call it the tree of life because people eat the fruit from it, they get food from it. People make clothes out of the leaves. People get medicine from like the roots. And it's so big that people actually live in the tree. Like they cut it open and they actually live in the tree. So it's known as the tree of life. And so the BaoBab Tree Foundation is a nonprofit educational organization that houses a lot of the programs that we do. We have an educational component called Wilson Baker Academy. We have entertainment component, edutainment component, where we teach children how to drum and dance. We teach them like history and culture through music. We have a basketball program where we teach them life skills through basketball. You know, that's going to now incorporate the mental component right, of healing, right? So it's our way that we can root ourselves within our community and then bring life back to ourselves and each other.
How will people who are interested, who want to donate, who want to support, how would they reach you guys or send in a donation?
Okay, so they could go to one cause / WBA Academy, one ONECAU period SE / WBA Academy.